Thank you, Betty. Thank you very much to the Cultural Policy Institute or Center for having me here. I really think it's wonderful that the university is having these events that are highlighting publishing, libraries, et cetera. And I like to think of as the scholarly communications ecosystem, which university presses and libraries are very important parts of. Thank you also for coming out on what it was our first reasonably cold day, which is harbinger of something. And as Betty mentioned, 2 weeks ago, Randy Picker gave what I thought was a fascinating presentation here in the first event in this series. He gave a summary of the ebook revolution from the perspective of an avid ebook reader, as well as an expert on copyright and privacy issues. He talked about how he's been reading digital books to his daughter, with his daughter, and how the digital formats really transformed that experience. I think we can all appreciate that. He also talked about the explosive growth of the ebook market in the last several years and what it means to have major players like Google, Amazon, and Apple jump in with both feet. And if you haven't read the Amazon terms of service and privacy policies since then, I'd be surprised. But Randy brought up issues that we as consumers of digital content really have to grapple with. Today I want to round out that story by coming at it from a different perspective. I'll tell you about the digital revolution from a view of a traditional publisher. I'll give you a brief glimpse of what it's like to be in an industry where it seems like everything's changing, but in fact, nothing's changed. So it's actually a very interesting time for us. As Betty mentioned, I've been the director of the press since 2007, and I've been happily employed in scholarly publishing for the last 30 years. I think I can assume that all of you know that the University of Chicago is the home of one of the oldest and most important university presses in the world. But just in case, I'm going to give you a very brief history of the press. If you could, we'll hit the lights and make it a little easier to contrast. The University of Chicago Press was one of the original divisions of the university when it opened in 1892. I mention this first of all because it's unusual in university press publishing. I know of no other instance where the press was actually formed at the same time as the university opened. To me, that's indicative of the centrality of scholarly communications at Chicago. The press started as a printer of materials for the university, but soon expanded to publish journals like the Journal of Political Economy, the American Journal of Sociology, and books by non-Chicago faculty. In fact, John Dewey's book, The School and Society, published in 1899, is still in print for the University of Chicago Press in ebook and print format. The Chicago Manual of Style was first compiled and published in 1906 and remains the press's most famous publication. We publish some of the most influential books in sociology, the history of science, economics, and literary theory. Today, we publish close to 300 new books each year, over 60 journals. We have a distribution center on the south side that warehouses and ships books for more than 100 publishers. In addition to our print books, we have over 2,200 available in a variety of digital formats. We also have a digital distribution operation that stores, formats, and delivers digital files for more than 100 publishers around the world. For the sake of timing, I'm going to only concentrate on books here. The journal path to digital has been a completely different story, maybe for another time. But like any major change, the early history of digital publishing is dotted with minor successes and significant failures. Though the exact origin of the ebook is open for interpretation, it's generally accepted that Michael Hart got things rolling when he typed the Declaration of Independence into a computer and transmitted it to his colleagues at the University of Illinois in 1971. Many in this room might argue that there was another time, but that was an interesting time. And around this time, he also founded Project Gutenberg, which in the years since has digitized over 40,000 out-of-copyright works. But for those of us in scholarly publishing, there were two signal events in the early history of ebooks. One was the hype around the creation of the Rocket Ebook reader in 1998. Does anybody remember that? Anybody? No. And the second was the launch of a company called Net Library in 1999. These two companies had ambitious goals to provide books to consumers and to libraries in electronic form, and it's fair to say that everyone in publishing fell over themselves, prognosticating about where we're going. Literally, the forecasts were unbelievable, that print books would disappear in 3 years, multi-billion-dollar companies in weeks. It was kind of shocking. Rocket Ebook was revolutionary. It was a handheld device that could hold 10 books 10 books, 4,000 pages of text. Net Library was a bold new company that was going to offer access to libraries, hundreds of thousands of books for 24/7 access. We all saw the possibilities. We went to our industry meetings. The Association of American University Presses meets every year, and I went back to the program from 1999, 2000, and that's when the first sessions on ebooks started happening, and it just kept going and kept going. But then nothing actually really happened. The Rocket Ebook device was heavy. It didn't have very good display. It cost too much. It wasn't marketed very well, and it more or less disappeared within a couple of years. Actually, it was sold to the U.S. Army. The overstock was sold to the Army for use on electronic delivery of manuals. Net Library started off with a bang, signing up practically every scholarly book to participate in its service. But it too foundered and went bankrupt within a few years, and today it's part of a large content aggregation company called EBSCO, and the Net Library name has disappeared entirely. In both of these cases, I think it's fair to say that they were ahead of their times. They were certainly ahead of the publishing industry. In fact, I lay a lot of the blame for their failure at the feet of the publishers. It turns out that despite being very capable sellers of print books, when it came to digital books, we had no idea what we wanted. Net Library told us that libraries wanted to use digital books in new and different ways, but we only saw the threat to our print business. We promoted the development of digital rights management software that purportedly limited access to the books so that they couldn't be stolen. But instead, they just became a target for hackers, which were easily cracked, and we in fact limited the use of our books, and we're living with that legacy to this day. But there were certainly success stories along the way. The E-Ink Corporation was founded in 1997, and the invention of electronic paper that they touted held great promise. Stephen King sold 400,000 copies of an ebook called Riding the Bullet in 2000. It was only available to be read on a computer screen. There were no ebook readers necessarily that were available. But publishers took notice of that and thought, there's something there. He sold it for $2.99, I think. But it wasn't really until 2007, as Randy pointed out in his presentation, that Amazon released its first version of the Kindle, and things really started to happen. And that was only 6 years ago. I mean, it seems unbelievable that all this has happened in 6 years. The iPad only came out 3 years ago, and I think there's one coming out today, a new version today. And I'm going to pause and just say that I tell you again that I've been in publishing for 30 years, and I love this industry. And when I say that publishers are not the most responsive and agile business people, I say it with love and affection for the industry. But it's true. Despite talking about the revolution for the better part of a decade, we were still woefully behind when the revolution actually happened, and we've been trying to catch up since then. Amazon launched the Kindle with 90,000 ebooks. Sounded like a lot at the time, but it was really a pittance. They would have gone out with hundreds of thousands of titles, frankly, if it wasn't for publishers. Publishers didn't have their act together. They didn't know if they had rights to things. They didn't have files for things. They didn't feel comfortable signing the Amazon agreement. Many publishers still don't feel comfortable signing the Amazon agreement. It's a very restrictive document. But a lot of things got in the way, but the biggest really was the fear that we would lose control of our content the way the music industry did. And I think it's hard to say that sometimes, but it's in reality we acted out of fear. And when you're acting out of fear, it's not you're not really moving things forward in the right way. So, but at many publishers, in order to expedite that process, the decision was made to just publish books without concern about the rights. They just made them available. From an author standpoint, that's not a very fair way to looking at things either. No royalties were set up and other things were set up. So at the press, we decided to actually do the very safe and fair thing, which is to go to all of our authors and try to get new agreements and get them to agree to and understand what we're doing with ebooks, which is time consuming, and it took a lot of resources to accomplish it. In the meantime, this company established itself as the first and the biggest mover in the ebook industry. It not only had the devices, but it also had the customer relationship with millions of people. Amazon was followed in the market by other entrants, and then several more. At UCP, we set up contracts and working relations with all of them. Before long, there were many more. And then it just proliferates. All of them require a separate agreement. All of them require separate negotiations. They all consider themselves slightly better than each other. They all say that they're going to take down Amazon. They're going to do this, that, and the other thing. So, sometimes we take them seriously. We were very profligate, I think, in the early days of signing on with a whole bunch of different vendors. And in fact, literally, they'd sell nothing. They would get all the books out there. It became a little scary thing to put all of your content on a server somewhere else around the world and hope that those people would report sales back to you. It's a very different world. But we now do actually have contracts with 22 separate companies, but as with most publishers, our primary relationship is with Amazon. Actually, it's probably better if I do that. Okay. And this is why. Amazon sells 81% of our ebooks to the retail market. Despite trying pretty hard, none of the others have cracked into double digits. And these are not small companies. Google and Apple have a combined market cap of $900 billion. Admittedly, they have other interests, but they've tried. They've really tried to compete with Amazon, and they haven't come close to overtaking them. This is probably a bit more stark on our part as far as our relationship with Amazon than it is with, say, companies like HarperCollins or Macmillan, who Amazon probably has somewhere in the area of about 60% market share, but still 60% is pretty darn good. We send Google, Apple, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, all these others. We send them all the same files. They sell them at the same prices. Amazon, frankly, is the only company that was big enough that was okay with losing money on practically every single sale that they made. And that's the reality of it. Is they lost money, they bought market share that way, and now they have the market share. So it's in a lot of ways a brilliant strategy. As this slide shows, Amazon has been so successful selling ebooks that they long ago eclipsed the sale of print books in the US and the UK. Japan is on its way, and Germany is well on its way as well. Amazon's reached the point where they're both the hero and the villain in this story. If it wasn't for them, I'm not sure that ebooks would be so well established, but at the same time, many publishers feel at a distinct disadvantage when negotiating with such a powerful company. There's a book out now, I think it's called The Everything Store, in which there's a description of Amazon's business practices, and there's an interesting strategy that they had. I think it was something called the Gazelle option, in which they said that small publishers are like a wounded gazelle, and Amazon is circling them, and actually, and they changed that to the Small Publisher Opportunity Program or something, something like that. So. University of Chicago Press is a large university press, but ultimately a small publisher within this environment. We have print sales of around $20 million on our book side. That's absolutely nothing compared to even the smallest of the big six publishers. Macmillan has sales close to $500 million. So it's quite a big difference. From UCP's perspective, we've seen some spectacular growth in the ebook sales over a short time. Back in 2008, ebooks represented 0.2% of our sales. In the fiscal year that ended just this past July, 14.5% of our sales were digital. Though the growth has slowed this year, I put the next 3 years sort of projections on there, and it brings us to about a quarter of our sales being digital. And that's actually pretty aggressive for university presses. As I said, we distribute books for university presses and for other publishers, and we see what their sales are. Many university presses are stuck in sort of 1, 2 to 5% of sales being digital, but at least they're there, which is a big step forward. In the early days, we found these sales to be additive to our overall sales, though. We have actually seen in the last couple of years a significant erosion of print sales. The blue there is the print, and the red is the ebook. And the overall sales have not actually changed all that much. So we're not actually seeing a big increase. We're just seeing the print actually going away. So, but not so quickly. So that gives you a sense of the financial reality of the press and our position within the ebook ecosystem. The next part of the presentation is just brief little spots about how we have evolved. As I mentioned, the Manual of Style is arguably the most famous book published by the press. Through its first 14 editions, it existed only in print. This is a battle-scarred version of the 10th edition from 1937. Happened to be the only one that was in my office. And here then is the most recent incarnation, the 16th edition in its lovely shade of blue. Trust me, that was a big decision on our part to go blue. You have no idea. The manual has been changed significantly over the years and put to use in a number of ways. I just had to throw that in there. We didn't do this. But the biggest change occurred in 2008 when the 15th edition went online. And it was released as an online subscription product. It was updated when the 16th was released, and this is the homepage. The Manual of Style Online is actually an exact reproduction of the print. Authority here is extremely important, and it's actually so word for word the manual appears online as it does in print. When we make changes to when the book reprints and we do new editions, we put those changes into the online as well. Our audience demands that. So this involved a tremendous amount of work and a great deal of angst at the press. I wasn't here, but we do have Christy Henry, who was here and experienced that. But and again, we had predictions of the print would go away and the online would take over, and that really hasn't happened. As with our ebooks, this is not entirely borne out with the online version, but we have actually seen significant growth. Print is the blue here, and the online is the red. So each year the print gets a little older and kind of goes down, but the online is actually growing. It's the same edition of that, and the online is actually, in a way, somewhat more sustainable because it's a subscription product to libraries, to companies, to individuals, and we have to get them to renew with us, but in fact they do, and they value the product. So again, it's a major transformation of our business and how we do what we do. Excuse me. Another illustration of change at the press and publishing in general is the catalog. You probably don't think about book catalogs all that much, but publishers really do. Publishers have been producing print catalogs of their new books for nearly as long as there have been publishers. This is Chicago's most recent. They're painstakingly produced at least 2 times a year and are used by publishers to signal the most important titles. They're kind of a database of that season's titles. Not surprisingly, the database has moved online. Edelweiss is a service that aggregates book information for around 120 publishers that represent roughly 95% of all books published in the United States. The press joined the service in the last year or so, and we found that the online offers much that print does not offer, including unlimited space for extra material and reviews. You could put video up there, you could put extra pages, all those other things. Lots of this below the fold here that provides lots more information. Everything's flat though. Everything is the same. Everything looks basically the same. So the idea that publishers have their 2- and 3-page spreads about books to show this is the most important book we have, in fact, very difficult to do in this environment. So again, it requires an adjustment on the part of booksellers and publishers to, say more about their books or do more for them. So you've got benefits and detriments for both. Again, there's predictions that print catalogs will go away and that Edelweiss and companies like this will take over, but reviewers don't want to look at things online and they don't want to see this, and bookstores really like to hold the print catalog and write in the margins and whatnot. So we do both. So we're evolving. So everything is we're responsive to that part of the market. Final illustration has to do with something we call piracy. Many of you will not think of it as piracy, but it's usually considered to be the use or sale of copyrighted materials without the permission of the copyright holder. This is how piracy used to happen. A person made a copy of a book and distributed it to a reasonably small circle. All in all, this was a nuisance for publishers, and it was considered a controlled nuisance in a way because it required people to actually give things to people and see them. But once that copier became a scanner and connected to the internet, and the files were circulated, sometimes very innocently, sometimes not so innocently, then it became a completely different issue. Today, I can be assured, I don't even think about it anymore, that all of our books are available free online almost as soon as we publish them. And this is true, mostly true for the trade publishers, is that you can find anything, usually before it's available in any stores. We are quite often the source of those files. We create them, we send them out. Sometimes we send them out to reviewers, we send them out in other places, and they just propagate. And it's just become part of what we do. Within scholarly publishing, there's a fair argument to be made that this kind of copying and this proliferation of versions of the book is not actually detrimental to our sales. It is actually possibly advertising. And the fact that somebody wants to push a book out to a friend and show somebody what's this new scholarship could actually be helpful to us. We haven't seen any real examples of it hurting sales. But when we sign a contract with an author, one of the agreements we make with them is to protect their copyright. And so stepping into the void is a company called Digimarc. Digimarc has literally been formed by the fact that there's a proliferation of illegally copied files all over the internet, and it's really hard to find them and really hard to take them down. So we pay a not inconsiderable sum to this company to basically scour the internet, open web, and issue takedown notices as required by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998. That says that we state that we are the copyright holder, and we demand that they take it down. And if you can see some of the detail here, I think I got a pointer here. Yeah, they have where is it? Titles under management, 9,038 of our titles. They've issued 12,000 notices. They've had success on 8,391 of them. Their sites are all over the world, and it just never stops. Now, piracy, is a somewhat misleading term. I mean, it almost makes it sound like people are making money on these things. The vast majority of these not making money at all. Sometimes it's philosophical. People put works up on for free because they feel that they should be free. It's very difficult to stop. But as I said, there are authors who couldn't care less about this. They might see it as a perfectly natural thing to do, but there are many others who come to us and complain rather vociferously that their book is available this way, and we have to do something about it. So we employ this company to basically do the takedown. It's kind of a nice little backup for us. It makes us feel that we're doing something, but to be honest, I'm not sure what we're doing. we're taking things down, they're going back up again. So it's an odd time as far as that's concerned, but at the same time, it's not as disastrous, I think, as what's happened in the music industry, where individual tracks are proliferated. Books are different. Books are read differently, treated differently, and consumed differently, and I think that's a big difference here. Let's see. The final part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about what it means to be post-digital. I put that in the description. To me, post-digital refers to the point where we are no longer thinking about print and digital as distinctly different formats that have distinctly different processes. They've become so much a part of what we do on a day-to-day basis that it's no longer useful to distinguish between the two of them, between digital publishing and print publishing. It's just publishing. To illustrate this, I thought it would be useful to see what our pre-digital workflow looked like and compare it to our post-digital workflow. That the path from becoming post-digital has involved a great deal of change, and so I'll take you through a little bit of that. So we have a pre-digital workflow that goes from the author to the acquisitions editor to the contracts and rights department, to manuscript editing, to design and production, to sales and marketing, to distribution, and then finally to financial reporting. Now that was pre-digital, and post-digital is, gosh, now I thought if I take you through each of these, it's worth illustrating the changes that have occurred. For the authors, it's been reasonably easy for the authors, frankly. They're still writing books much like they have in the past, but they do have to think differently about all the rights to the material they're using. They have to make sure that the files are formatted correctly. And these days, publishers are asking them to do things that they never had to do before. They have to write abstracts for each chapter describing what they're about to say in their chapter, so that the metadata that exists for the work is actually discoverable. They have to come up with keywords that describe the chapters. They're also being asked to publicize themselves in social media and other places, and I can tell you that some people are not happy with that. In general, authors, I think, feel that they're being asked to do a lot of things that publishers should be doing, but we push back and say, well, you know the content better than we do, and you're the one who really probably should be talking about this more. So it's an interesting and uneasy balance. For acquisition editors, they are the people who work with the authors to bring the book to the press. We have one of the finest in the industry here, Christy Henry, sitting with us. But more often than not, when the authors fail to do some of those things that I just showed you before, the acquisitions editors and the staff there fill in the gaps. They also have to deal with evolving author expectations. As an author gets more interested in digital publishing, they start thinking, well, can't I just put everything up on the web? And can it be, why should there be any length restrictions? I could just put everything there, can't I? But the reality is we print the books too. Books have become longer and longer. Print runs have become shorter and shorter. Everything's become more expensive. So we kind of have to keep balancing that. So that's a post-digital way of looking at it, is you really are covering both sides of it and you're doing both services. In contracts and rights, really, just about everything. We've had to adapt our contracts to fit the new models of the business. We've had to go backwards and revise our contracts. We deal with authors and estates. We have so many of the points within the contracts have become much more contentious. Some things that we never thought about in the past really just sort of rise up, and they start thinking about them having to do with revisions and other kind of things that are in the future, and what will happen and what publishers' rights we have. This area also covers our foreign translation rights, and foreign publishers. European publishers and South American publishers have been much slower to get to digital publishing, and so we find we have to, part of our negotiations is explaining exactly what we're going to be doing with these books, which is really time consuming and has really changed quite a bit. So, manuscript editing is also known as copy editing in a lot of places. Chicago calls it manuscript editing. It's the process of copy editing the book, and that's evolved in the recent years to include all the coding that goes into rendering the digital version of the book. So we're asking the manuscript editors not only to know the Chicago manual style inside and out, and to apply that skill to the manuscripts that come in, and we're talking about hundreds of manuscripts, many tens of thousands of words. But also they need to input the right codes to assure that the final version of the book looks right in both print and digital form. So they're doing that on screen. They're basically working from an XML schema to basically enter all these into the right place, so that when it gets typeset or when it gets sent to a digital post-production operation, it actually works right. So manuscript editors are also dealing what one of them referred to as perpetual draft mode. The authors in the room might understand what I mean by that. A book comes in, boy, it's easy to change, and just slot a few words in here, and just change this, and why are you complaining? And the manuscript editors are used to going through it, finalizing it, moving it on, and then doing little revisions over time. It really has changed when it becomes digital, and actually email has facilitated that rather significantly as well. And if it seems like I'm disparaging our authors, I'm really not. It's really that the technology has changed so much, and that that our perceptions of the processes and the perception doesn't always align with the actual way it works, and it involves change on both parts. Authors have come to understand this, but within the press, it's actually been a harder thing in a lot of ways for people to change the way they do their jobs. As you can imagine, design and production has had to become post-digital more completely than other areas. The creation of the books, whether digital or print, has changed tremendously. It used to be acceptable to use the print PDF to create your ebook, but it's not as flexible as XML, so therefore that XML workflow that I mentioned before had to be developed. Again, a lot of training, a lot of cost on our part to basically put these things in place and get it up to speed. And as digital sales have grown, the print runs have actually declined. So design and production is tasked with making sure that we can continue to publish books to the level of quality that we have, but we're printing fewer of them. That means the cost per unit is actually quite a bit higher, so the prices then that go up. So you're always constantly balancing those things. Another thing is that one of our strengths is the design of the page and the design of the book, the production value of the books, and that gets commoditized as an ebook because the ebooks more or less look the same. So how do we actually evolve to develop further strengths in this area as ebooks progress? What we've done is really try to establish systems of best practices for things like footnotes, citations, the things that are important to us, maybe not so important to fiction publishers. And we're a noted publisher of poetry. Poetry is very difficult to present in digital form. The line length, the visual representation of the poem on the page is extremely important. But there's a yearning for digital versions of this. So we work with the Poetry Foundation to actually help create a collection of poems to celebrate their 100-year anniversary, and that we took that as an opportunity to basically rethink the way books get that poems get presented, and it has to do with where the line breaks are, what's the right presentation of fonts, embedded fonts into the file that really present the poetry in the best fashion. So again, very interesting, but it involved an evolution on our part. And finally, there's the book cover. I like to think that this is the area that really hasn't changed all that much. Authors and publishers are obsessed with book covers. I don't know if users or readers are that obsessed with it, but boy, it's unbelievable. The design of the cover is deemed to be one of the most crucial elements in the creation of the book. Yet as we move to digital, the cover more or less disappears. It appears in online catalogs in a sort of small blurry thumbnail. The digital readers are actually designed to skip everything having to do with the covers and jumps directly to the first page of text, so you don't ever see it. When you're creating a cover, you're often buying art. You're paying permissions for the print version of that. And if you turn to the Getty archive or somebody like that, you say you want to do it in digital form, they'll charge you a lot of money. You then make the decision, will anybody see this cover on the digital form? No, so you then don't pay it. So you'll find a lot of ebooks now don't have very generic covers or just text covers, and that's why is really the cost is not deemed to be worth actually expending. So I can assure you that actually, as we speak, there are probably arguments going on at the press building right now about covers, and whether it's between authors or whether it's between designers and editors and everything else. But more and more, this most important part of the publishing process is actually sort of evolving. So, in sales and marketing, the post-digital world means that we're always developing relationships with new customers. I showed you all those companies that we're dealing with. We have new customers that are completely new, and then we have new customers that are older companies that are evolving their business practices to actually sell digital products. The older customers are often doing it rather slowly, and sometimes not very well. and we can kind of keep pace with that. But the new companies are really impatient with our inability to understand what they want to do, and again, they could become victims of of publishers' inability to evolve. So, in sales and marketing, we've entered a world where free is a price point. And since digital content can easily be made freely available, as we know from the piracy side of it, sometimes we can actually empower ourselves by pushing free things out there. The press has been giving away a free ebook of the month for the last 3 years. We started this as a way of getting people used to ebook content and getting them to know that we actually have it. But it's really become something different since then. Right now, each month we promote and publicize a free ebook of the month, and we give away there's about 5,000 people on average each month request an ebook from us. Almost every month, only half of them open the ebook. So they request it, and only half of them open it. It's almost lockstep for the last 3 years. It's been the same thing. So I present this as one of the sort of challenges that we have is that we offer this content and we've made it free, but have we made it valueless? Is it something that actually no one values because it's free? And I've talked to some people who have taken these books and they said, "Oh, it's free. I just collect free links and I just sort of I'll get to it eventually." And I don't know about you guys, but I don't tend to get to them when they're free, and I'm not sure if that's just me, but. But this also ties into the pricing issue. If any of you followed the Apple and Amazon pricing situation recently, the biggest concerns publishers had was that Amazon was driving down the price of digital content. It wasn't necessarily that the publishers were making less money on that. It was really the perception that ebooks were not as valuable as print books were, and what did that mean for the future? If in fact ebooks replaced print books, you'd be saying that you'd have to sell, twice as many copies of that ebook as you would the print book in order to make as much money. Maybe, maybe by lower prices that those books would sell more, but it's not always the case. Let's see. In our post-digital world, we also experiment around different formats in our content. At the press, we created a list of titles called Chicago Shorts. They're a mix of new and repurposed material from books that are available in digital-only versions. We sell them for between 99 cents and $2.99. We sell them through all the digital vendors, and I will confess they have not worked. They have not taken off in any particular way whatsoever. But again, we're constantly experimenting. We're able to sort of look at that and say, did we in fact put too much older content in there? Do we need something new? Is it the author? Is it the subject area? Is it the price? So the good news is that we didn't print 2,000 of them and put them in the warehouse, but at the same time we can move on to the next experiment, and we have a lot of information about the market and what it takes to get these new products developed quickly. Our distribution center, as I mentioned, is a $325,000 square foot facility that's primarily devoted to printed publications. But even here, the post-digital world has made an impact. In addition to the 11 million printed volumes that we have on site, we have thousands of titles set up for digital print on demand within our warehouse. This virtual inventory is for books that run out of stock or are selling at a level that does not justify a full reprint and a restock. Though this used to be for older books, we're actually evolving more where new books are actually sometimes being published as print on demand. You don't take the risk of printing too many if you're somewhat unsure about the likely demand for the book. Across all of our publisher clients, print inventories have declined in recent years, so the distribution center has evolved to become a more efficient operation by instead of having large locations for pallets full of books, they have small locations that have only 1 or 2 boxes of the books. So ostensibly you could fit more books in there, but it's a constantly changing puzzle that you're trying to put together. So yes.
What's the, don't mean to interrupt, but it's very pertinent to this. What's now the average print sale number for the 300 books you publish a year? I mean, for a single one.
Well, I think the most pertinent description there would be like the monograph, the print monograph, the things that are not textbooks, that are not trade books. We print about 650 to maybe 800 copies at the most of those. We expect to sell within the first year around 400, and maybe about 600 over the course of 3 years, and that's been going down, and that would be the average. It's been slipping gradually. Yeah. We right now, when we're estimating a book and imagining what the likely market will be, we've split it into the ebook market and the print market, we attribute cost to the ebook, even though from an accounting standpoint that's kind of tricky because there is no inventory to actually apply to, but we still ascribe cost to it so that we're not making wrong decisions on pricing and everything. So now the ebook is around 10% or so of the sales, what we're kind of factoring in, even though there are some cases where it's quite a bit higher or lower than that. So that's another factor that we look at is really how much of this is ebook. And we also, ebook has allowed us to sell into libraries in not just a single book way, like a single book going to the Regenstein or something like that. We could actually sell, a book to a library consortia for a lot more money for one copy of that, but it's being shared by other libraries. So again, the single unit of that book might be very different in the presentation of the print run. So counting is very different. Counting becomes different. Yes. That's a good point. I'm getting there too. Okay, so then the last part of the workflow is really the financial reporting. Really, this has been felt very keenly by the people who ingest all the information that comes from all the digital distributors that we work with. There are no set rules on this. It's really the Wild West as far as the reporting is concerned, when they report, how they report. It'll settle down over time, but it hasn't settled down in 6 years, so I'm not sure where it's going. One example of this is a company called eBrary. eBrary sells our ebooks to libraries around the world, but it's not as simple, as I mentioned to Carol, as one book is going to one library. They sell at least under five different sales models. They have a single-use model, they have a 3-user model, they have a unlimited multi-user model, a patron-driven acquisition model, and a subscription model. Regenstein actually works under the subscription model. They subscribe to 90,000 different ebooks for a set price per year, but then they don't own those books. All of these have different prices and discounts. So you can imagine that when they report to us on upwards of 2,000 plus books, the spreadsheet is pretty unbelievable. And we literally have 1 or 2 people at the warehouse kind of trying to figure it all out. So in addition, we're in a world in which the tax code has changed for digital downloads, changing all the time in every state as far as whether there is digital downloads are taxable or not. Europe is changing. We also report into the UK and Canada, all their tax changes. So we have to stay on top of that in order to assure that we're compliant. So quite a challenge. So hope this gives you a glimpse of what the press is doing. You can see that the digital has affected or transformed really everything that we do. I half-jokingly tell people that if you don't think digital is affecting your job, then you're not trying hard enough, or you're not. But and this last slide is really the things that keep me up at night, and I'll just quickly kind of go through them. But you may or may not know that that Congress is actually beginning the process of updating the copyright law. Randy mentioned this, and the last one took 25 years to do. It's going to take forever, but if it does, they're going to go after a lot of things that are really important to publishers, related to the ownership of books and how they get used. And it's actually a really important thing. Open access. This really applies right now more to journals than it does to books, but there's legislation in states like Illinois that require that anything that is published by an academic at a public institution here has to be made immediately freely available in an open access repository. California has similar laws. There are, I think, 5 or 6 other states that are doing this. It's mostly surrounding issues like Elsevier's incredible pricing model for scientific material, and the fact that governments have actually paid for much of the research, and institutions have paid for it, and the question of whether it should be made available to the public, and so that's an important thing within our environment as well. Short-term loans and digital rentals. So this is again something that libraries deal with. They're loaning books a day at a time, hours at a time. Sometimes ebooks allow for this, so we have to develop pricing that's around this. We have to decide whether we want to do this or not. Digital rentals, you'll see on Amazon right now and Google as well. Books, our books, many other publishers' books are available for rent, sometimes for a month, sometimes for shorter periods. We have actually been renting books on our site for the last 3 years. We have a flat $7 a book to rent it for 30 days, and roughly half of the ebook sales on our site are $7 rentals. So the book disappears off of your device after 30 days. Patron-driven access is another thing that you may or may not know, and I don't know if it's going to be touched on in the library sessions that you guys talk about. Is again where libraries are not buying in advance of somebody wanting something. They'll only buy it when the patron at the library wants it and actually starts reading it. So we have to make our books available as an entire catalog so that they can the patrons can actually discover the books, can dip into them. If they spend time with them, they can automatically buy them. But the library has to control the budget there. And that's usually, again, has to do with ebooks, but that's also crossing over into print books too, as they're trying to figure out ways of actually doing patron-driven access for printed books. Continued and damaging piracy. As I said, publishers are ambivalent about piracy, about whether it really is hurting things. But there is a lot of talk about a tipping point at which everything is available free, that that reservations about getting this material online for free and worry about viruses and everything else just disappears, and in fact it's just much easier and much what does that mean for our market? That definitely keeps you up. And then new models, the used digital market. Again, something you may not think about, but a company called Redigi started this with music, and they were sued successfully by Capitol Records. I'm not sure, a music company. But the idea is that you buy a digital book, you're finished with it, and like you could do with your print book, you could sell that print book, but you can't do that with an ebook. But they're trying to find a market for that for the used ebook. It would allow you as a buyer to basically buy your Harry Potter book for $19.99 and then sell it for $7.99, and then the next person could sell it for $2.99, and it's the same file. It's actually just a copy of the file that you had. So that is likely to come. Amazon has already purchased the patents for a lot of this technology. Redigi is supposed to open up their bookstore pretty soon. We're talking to them and we're interested, but at the same time scared to death. And coming up most recently has been some subscription services for books, sort of Netflix for books. And there's a company called Oyster that just came out just recently, and Scribd, which Scribd is a online sharing site, file sharing site, that's actually set up a subscription option. HarperCollins was the first publisher to jump into that. And basically, you have the right to browse through all these books, and the publisher gets paid based on how much the books get used. Again, from the standpoint of how we account for that and how we pay authors back and how we sort of do what we have been doing, it's a very different world. So. That's my presentation, and thank you very much. And if there's any questions about what we do, I'm more than happy to spend some time. So thank you. turn on lights if you want. Yeah. Any questions? Yes.
I suspect that from the author's standpoint, particularly academic authors, the concern about piracy is not so much in terms of the erosion of market share or the sales and the monetary end of it. It's more from a intellectual property and plagiarism standpoint. In other words, there's concern that I think a lot of the digitizing of things and making them freely available without a whole lot of control makes it easier for people to appropriate work, change it without your control over it.
Yeah. I think that's probably true, but in the same way that I mentioned that this company Digimarc has sprung up and actually become a completely different industry that never really existed. There are companies now that actually will do plagiarism checking and actually sort of tell you we actually employ it within our journals division, and so it scans the entire content and gives you a likelihood as to whether that material has been appropriated from something else, because it has a whole other corpus that it's viewing as well. So in a way that has been anticipated and actually sort of acted on.
How good is the software for ensuring that you can't cut and paste stuff out of the ebook?
It's only as good as the next hacker who decides that that's the target. That's it's an interesting thing. Is when I mentioned digital rights management software is we're all publishers were for it. It's like, of course it makes sense. Lock it in so that we're criminalizing all of our legitimate users of this. The vast majority of people want to use this on their own readers. They're not likely to share it. They're not likely to do other things like that. But there are plenty of instances, and I think a study just came out yesterday about, unfortunately, students are the biggest users of these pirated materials. Not in a sort of really criminal way in any way. It's just they're there and they've become used to using them that way. And I think that's it's a huge challenge for us to view our customers in a way that's actually healthy, as opposed to something that's treating them like that they're always going to do the wrong thing. So I could talk both sides of it. So.
As on the flip side, one thing on one of your slides that just caught my eye was the thing about the digital or ebook being there forever, and you need to sell it forever. In science, a lot of things change very dramatically as they evolve, and it would be nice to be able to get rid of the old version.
Yeah.
Is there any?
I suppose as many people would argue that it's useful to see the old one and then see how things have evolved. So from a research standpoint, yeah, exactly. Yeah, those people. But yeah, well, part of that point of that slide was actually to say that, or that point was to say that it used to be that books would have a life, and they would sort of, you'd print 1,000 of them. They would sell down over the course of 7-8 years. There wouldn't be enough demand for it, so you'd put it out of print. We don't put books out of print anymore. They move into print on demand. They move into other areas where it's only if like the author demands the rights back or something like that to maybe do whatever they're going to do with it, that we actually lose rights to books anymore. So in a way, the backlog, the backlist becomes massive and is always being sold. Amazon is wonderful at selling the backlist. They the virtual catalog that is a website like that can really present old and new content in a way that we never could before. So yes.
In regards to the plagiarism concerns, one of the things that I personally find harder about digital books is that when you do want to cite something properly, the page numbers are gone for a lot of them. Well, it depends on the platform, but for Kindle, there's more pages. How does the Chicago Manual address citing in the
I will unfortunately not have the exact way that the manual does it, because I'm not that steeped in it, but I do know that this has come up, and I think the recommendation is basically to be as specific as you can about the device and the version that you're actually using, which is kind of bizarre in a way, because you're saying, you're almost saying, I'm using this book on this Kindle with this software. And you can't imagine doing it that way. That's why Kindle actually moved towards real page numbers. They actually have, and we do that as well with the new books. And again, you're taking the print paradigm and you're putting it onto the digital by saying there's pages here. But it is precisely for that point. It's basically so that if someone was in a classroom and referencing page 32, you could find page 32 in your Kindle, though it might be on screen 7 or something like that, or however you do it. So again, it's evolving, and I think that the manual style can make recommendations about things, and I could actually try to find exactly what we do recommend. But I think that's along the lines is try to be as specific as you can as what you're using to.
But it's very difficult because most of the hardware that was out 10, 15 years ago is in the Smithsonian now. Yeah. And so, those references will because of this lack of uniformity, the references it's kind of a nightmare. Yeah. I mean, it's a transitional period while we figure this out, but you could only address it as responsibly as you can right now, but
it's part of the reason why, frankly, scholarly books, books that are used for those purposes, have not shifted to digital on things like Kindle as quickly. They're available, but the sales are just not as strong. So those books are where we might see. We publish fiction at the press, and something like a River Runs Through It, or one of those kinds of books sells 70% of the sales through Amazon go through as Kindle, and that really changes the way we print things. But when you have manuals or other kind of books like that actually are used in different ways, 5 to 7% of the sales will go through as Kindle, and so it'll be very different. Yeah.
As opposed to an ease. That brings me to one quick question I just wanted to ask. At being over 60, that actually means all sorts of things, but one of the things it means is that I have a long set of habits around books. When we just recently moved, I got rid of altogether 80 bags of books to the neighborhood book sale. So I was able to relinquish books, which was a big move for me. But I know how I like to read. I know what I want to read, and I've found a way now. For instance, I'm reading John Richardson's biography of Picasso. It's an odd choice because there's a lot of pictures in it, but I find that I read this very quickly, and it works really well. But I know that I will never read it again. Not because it's not good, but because there's only so much time in the world to do this. Other books, I'm at a point where I'm making very clear choices about what I buy in hardback, what I buy digitally, and what I buy in both. And I still buy a lot of books. So am I just an anomaly?
You are post-digital. No, you are exactly like our market, to tell you the truth. I mean, I think people are making those decisions on a daily basis. It's not always that the book isn't available in digital form that drives you to it. Sometimes it's a particular author that you like to, or you really like the way the publisher designed those pages. I mean, literally, there are things like that, and much more practical use is whether the digital format is functional enough for the purposes that you want to put it to, so yeah, no, I it's the number one question I get when people ask me is, will print books go away? I'm like, no, they're not. They're not gonna go away in any time that I feel like I'm going to be working at the press. That's for sure. And we're printing fewer of them. There's no doubt about that. There are going to be inroads made on digital for good or for bad in a lot of ways. But we're going to be printing books for a long time. And if it went one way or the other, we could set up our processes to go that way. But now we have to do both, and we actually have to sort of handle both sides of it. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Just wanted to pick up on the reference, like Picasso type book. Call it a picture book, you know, our coffee table. You probably don't do a whole lot of that, but if illustrations are an important element of the book, and you referenced how it costs far more to have Corbin's picture on the cover of a book and have the digital rights for it. Does that set up the possibility of two definite versions? You know, the hard copy will have all these printed illustrations because you can get them at a much lower rate than if you were putting them out into the world in the digital form. So therefore, again, the publication track is double or triple track.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case. I mean, the interesting story I'll tell you is that we had an author who pressed us very hard to get his book in digital form, and so we did. And the book was an 8x10 book with maps of the United States that spread across 2 pages. And literally, I think he was pressuring another part of our organization, because if he came to me, I would have told him, don't do this. But his first view of his book was on this, and he was like, "This is horrendous. What do you?" And I was like, "Of course it is. It's a PDF that you have to sort of." So, Christy might be able to even speak a bit about the fact that dealing with manufacturers or authors of these books, they can visualize the digital format in ways that we may not even be able to produce it, but it's getting better. I mean, do you want to say anything to that?
The issues have been the device limitations more than the ability to produce the files. Amazon's Replica has been one program where they've just recreated the page layout where you need those illustrations and text intact. I think certain authors are getting more savvy about that relationship with text to art because they don't want their books limited to print form. On the permissions issue, I think there has been a nice evolution with a lot of the rights holders, and that initially they were charging us exorbitant rates for e-rights, and they've come around to playing a bit more with print, and so it's gotten much more sensible than it was 3 years ago. It was crazy, the rates that we were seeing. I think more often than not what we're finding is what kind of additives people want to put in the ebook that aren't in the print, so rather than reducing the ebook from the print version, they're trying to enhance the print version with videos and with more images, and that introduces other issues with workflow and
also rights too.
And market, because it's unclear that there's a market yet for those. But you could produce the best app and ebook, expanded ebook, but in fact, will people be willing to pay the money to see it, or use it? I think you're right. Yeah.
What's the safest recommendation you can make for archiving?
For archiving your ebook collections?
No, for archive. Like if you write a book, are you better off trying to archive it on archival paper in the print version, or with some degree of certainty in digital? I mean, digital is not always forever.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Well, but it's an interesting point. Is in that companies like, Mellon has Portico, which is an archive for digital works. That's not quite answering your question because I'm not quite sure. But I mean, but it's certainly been it's been a big issue as to how these things get archived and get referenced for the future if somebody wants to look back and see what exactly it looked like. So I think again it's changing, but I think that big not-for-profits are out there. The Hathi Trust is keeping digital copies of works that are in the public domain available that way. As I said, all this.
What portion of the things you publish does the Library of Congress take in print form versus digital?
They take everything we publish in print form. They don't take things in digital form. They don't take any digital. No, unless we do you know? Is there any way that they take digital only content?
it's been hard enough to get them to move to digital for cataloging information.
Yeah, I mean the Library of Congress is. unbelievable as far as that's concerned. I mean, the process to actually get to where we were submitting electronic files to them so that they could actually catalog it. And it used to be a piece of paper that you had to put into a typewriter and type, and literally up until a couple of years ago. And so, yeah.
Oh, you mentioned that for scholarly publications, at least, you think of the open access sharing online as more as advertising, and I was wondering if that applies also for manuscripts based on dissertations that have been that are available electronically, and in particular thinking about the AHA recommendation to have students embargo their dissertations.
Yeah, boy, that was something that actually was interesting, because the AHA ended up kind of in effect speaking for university presses or something like that, and they really didn't talk to university presses. Or libraries. We publish a number of revised dissertations. Really, I mean, any dissertation that's going to be published by a publisher will tend to be revised, and you'd want it to be revised to make it not a dissertation. You know, there are some people out there that say, well, the core argument is still the same, you know, and that's the thing that's really valuable within this. Not really. You know, the presentation of the book and actually the making of it into a book, all the steps that I kind of went through, are really what's valuable to us. So, you know, we've existed for a really long time with, you know, dissertations available on microfilm, and now it's evolved into its being open on the web. The problem I see is that companies that previously had been like UMI or something like that has actually been putting dissertations out there are actually now selling them too. That's a different thing, where they're putting them on Amazon, and so then it becomes a very different thing, where there is a version of that that's not just out there to be gotten if somebody does the research and checks, but it actually kind of shows up side by side. I mean, it might have a different title to it or something like that. And there are, when academics sign the agreements to, you know, have their dissertation put into those, they're quite often signing an agreement that allows them to be commercialized. You know? And so that may change over in the short term, but it's kind of the case now. So I just sorry.
Regarding the tracking of how people, like if people even open the book or not, is that something that is pervasive in all of the softwares you sell?
You mean when I said that 5,000 go out, 5,000 links go out, and that only half of them open them up? Well, that's because that the way that we are actually offering up the books is through Adobe Content Server. So Adobe, we actually have it on a server, and we know that when we send a unique link out to somebody, they have to come back and actually download it. So we just get a record of that, and that as to whether they download or not.
Not actually read.
Oh no, the reading, once it's downloaded, we know nothing about what they're doing. Yeah. No, trust me. No, but. Many are. Amazon is absolutely tracking you. So.
Track what you highlight.
Well, they know exactly where you are in the book at any time. So trust me.
Yes. I'm curious about a little more about print on demand and how you see that working into the future with declining physical copy sales and like declining print runs. Do you think there's a point sometime in the near future at which there wouldn't be print runs and you would shift primarily to print on demand?
Yeah, it really, I mean, it's a sort of a combination of the quality of the print on demand, which used to be pretty bad, and it's getting better all the time, including images and color and all those other kind of things that actually, you know, really enhance the book, and the economics of it, where, you know, it used to be the prices were just so high that you ended up doing the simple balance of if you had a reasonable sense that you were going to sell 400 copies of a book, it was always better to print 400 than it was to print one at a time to get to 400. That's narrowing a little bit. You then have warehouse space issues that I mentioned about how much space you have and actually the opportunity cost that's involved with that space versus not having that space. So there's shipping, there's all these other kinds of things. So yeah, I can definitely say I know for a fact that many university presses have shifted to a print-on-demand only model where that's what they do, and not only university presses. When I was at Palgrave 7+ years ago, we just did a quick calculation. It just said, our typical hardback print run was 350 copies or whatever it was. Ingram Lightning Source is the name of the company, said we could print 350. Their pricing was based on demand, but then if we told them we're likely to print 350 over time, they gave us the price for 350 right up front for every single one until we got to that. When you presented that model, all of a sudden everything it changed quite a bit because you cut out the shipping, you cut out everything else, and it's a sort of economic game at that point. So, but if the quality is terrible, you're going to get complaints from authors and bookstores and everything else. So, yes.
Yeah, I was wondering that digital book and print book is usually priced differently. What is the rationale structure? Is that much dictated by Kindle, or you have a rationale how to price them?
Right.
And if you price them differently, do you pay different royalty to the authors?
Mm-hmm. Very valid, good questions. The pricing of ebooks. I think you're right by targeting Kindle to a certain degree because they set the mark at $9.99. They basically said that seems about right for them. Nope, there's no particular magic to that number, to tell you the truth. It was more of a marketing ploy, so to speak. Those same books that the book would be $17 or something like that. They were paying the publishers, the regular discounts on the $17 and not on the $9.99. So that's where I said Amazon could lose money on each one of these sales. They could actually lose money on those. Typically, publishers will price ebooks below the print price. A typical printing paper and binding for a physical book accounts for about 20% of the cost of the book. And so therefore, if you took that 20% out, not surprisingly, ebooks tend to be about 20% less than print books in the market. You'll sort of just see that as a sort of standard. Is that and I can't speak for other publishers or how they do it, but that's kind of what we looked at. We sort of said, well, it should be a little bit less expensive because we're not printing it, but it's not the total cost doesn't go out of it because we're still employing people. We're still doing all these other things that I mentioned to do the books the way they are. It's just when it comes down to printing them, we don't do that. We don't store them. So I think price is an area that's going to evolve quite a bit. Price is different when it was 10% of the market, and when it's going to be 70% of the market, it'll be very different then too, because publishers may value their books very differently as it becomes a more dominant part of it. So as far as royalties are concerned, there's been a big push towards higher royalties for ebooks. And it's usually on a net amount that we get in. When I described before about the way that revenue comes to us, it doesn't come to us as one book at a time. It comes to us as maybe 30 cents because of an access through eBrary. So you pay the author X% of 30 cents, and then you have to, you do that over time. It's a very different thing. So yes, there are different royalty rates that apply to print. Print is probably more traditional in the way that it's been done. A lot of publishers have sort of more or less know that's the way that the royalty rates are at a certain level. Ebooks are at a higher level, but I won't speculate as to whether that's going to change or not either. So.
I'm sorry that we're going to have to get out of our class. This is the next class coming in here, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.